Let's start with a question that might sting a little. How many times have you lost yourself while trying to hold on to someone else? Be honest. How many times have you bent over backwards, stayed available, checked your phone obsessively, only to watch them slowly drift away? It feels counterintuitive, right? You give more, they give less. You try harder, they pull back. And suddenly, you're no longer in a relationship. You're in a one-sided performance, desperately trying to be enough. Here's where most people get it wrong. They think love means constant access, proving loyalty, being there no matter what. But what if that's not love? What if that's fear disguised as devotion? And what if I told you that the most powerful move you can make, the one that flips everything, isn't to try harder, but to detach completely? Not from bitterness, not as a manipulation, but from power. The truth is, we've been sold a lie, a common belief wrapped in a toxic bow, that detachment equals disinterest, or that pulling back makes you cold and heartless. But what if detachment is the exact thing that makes you magnetic again? What if stepping back, not out of anger, but out of clarity, is what causes them to feel your absence so sharply that they have to come back, that they want to come back? This isn't about playing games. It's about shifting energy. It's about stepping out of the emotional chaos and back into your own center. Detachment is not withdrawal, it's elevation. It's the moment you stop pleading and start being. And the moment you do, everything shifts. That's not magic, it's emotional physics. So why is this so urgent to talk about now? Because far too many women are stuck in toxic emotional loops, over-investing in people who give them breadcrumbs. And the longer you stay in that cycle, the more you forget your own power. That ends here. If you're tired of chasing, tired of overthinking, tired of wondering why they're not showing up the way you deserve, this is your invitation to stop. What you're about to learn is not just about love. It's about transformation. It's about reclaiming your energy, honoring your worth, and witnessing the natural law of attraction that kicks in when you stop forcing and start flowing. We're going to explore the 6 shifts that happen when you detach completely, and how these subtle yet profound moves can create the exact emotional pull that brings them back to you. And yes, it happens faster than you think. If you've ever said to yourself, why do they only want me when I'm gone? Or how come the moment I stop caring, they show up again? You're not crazy. You're just beginning to understand. Something deeper, something rooted not in emotional chaos, but in stoicism. In Stoic relationships, you don't operate from anxiety, you operate from self-trust. Stay with me until the end, because the final shift might just change how you approach every connection for the rest of your life. You ready? Good, let's dive in. 1. Understand the power of energy shifts. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the vibe shift instantly, like something unspoken was heavy in the air? Maybe you didn't hear a word, but you felt it. That's energy. That's the invisible language we all speak but rarely understand. And when it comes to attraction, this energy is everything. So many women ask, what should I say to get his attention? Or what should I do to make him miss me? But here's the truth. It's not about what you say or do. It's about what you radiate. The energy you carry when you walk away. With peace, when you stop obsessing, when you stop energetically chasing, sends a message louder than any text. The moment you detach, the moment your nervous system stops clinging to the outcome, something inside of him begins to notice the shift. He doesn't always know what changed, but he feels it. That space you've just created by stepping back, that's the vacuum that pulls him in. This is not about manipulation or passive aggression. This is the universal principle of polarity. When you stop flooding someone with emotional energy, especially if they've taken it for granted, that absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. That silence echoes. He might have ignored your calls or skipped your messages before, but the moment you stop sending them, he feels something's missing. And that something was never just your words, it was the energy behind them. You were constantly feeding a connection with your attention, with your worry, with your emotional investment. When you finally remove that energy, cleanly, without drama, it creates tension, and tension is the birthplace of attraction. But here's the part that most people miss. Energy shifts aren't about punishing someone or playing a role to get a reaction. It's about finally being authentic. When you were anxiously checking your phone, staying up at night wondering if you said something wrong, pouring your heart into someone who barely meets you halfway, that wasn't authenticity. That was fear, attachment, survival mode disguised as love. Stoicism teaches us not to let our emotions control our responses, but to observe them and act from inner wisdom. Stoic relationships are built not on chasing or begging for connection, but on self-possession. So when you detach, what you're really doing is returning to yourself. You're calling your energy home. And when that happens, the dynamics shift. Not because he suddenly changed, but because you did. You became unavailable to chaos. You stopped entertaining inconsistency. And without saying a word, you began to show a new standard. This shift doesn't need to be announced. It doesn't require closure or a dramatic conversation. It is felt. And if he's attuned to your energy, even subconsciously, he will notice. The energy shift speaks louder than anything else. Consider this. When you're energetically attached, you are in constant motion toward him. Whether it's through thought, effort, or emotion, you are moving toward. And when you're in that mode, he doesn't have to move at all. You're doing the emotional lifting. You're filling in the silence. You're keeping the connection alive. So what happens? When you stop, what happens when you return to stillness? Suddenly there's space for him to wonder, space for him to remember, space for him to feel, and most importantly, space for him to move toward you. We live in a world that glorifies instant gratification, where detachment is mistaken for indifference. But Stoicism reminds us that real power is quiet. That true strength doesn't seek validation. It creates it internally. When you begin to value your peace more than your position in someone's life, you become untouchable. Your silence becomes sacred. Your energy becomes exclusive. And that's when they start to notice. That's when they ask themselves, where did she go? But the truth is, you didn't disappear. You just stopped feeding a dynamic that didn't feed you. And that change in energy, that is the signal. That is what makes them look back. Not because you made them jealous, not because you forced a reaction, but because you finally let the energy recalibrate itself. Most people are uncomfortable with this idea because it means letting go of control. It means you can't force someone to value you by explaining yourself one more time. It means trusting that your energy speaks volumes without having to prove your worth. This is hard. This is uncomfortable, especially when your heart still wants to reach out. But the moment you sit with that discomfort and don't reach out, that's when the shift begins. That's when your nervous system starts to recalibrate. That's when your entire frequency begins to realign with self-worth instead of desperation. And trust me, that realignment is what others begin to feel. They may not be conscious of it. They may not even know why they're thinking about you again. But they will. They'll check your stories, they'll send a text, they'll test the waters, not because you played a game, but because you removed your energy from the table, and suddenly the meal doesn't taste the same without it. We are all energetic beings. We feel when someone is obsessed with us. We also feel when that obsession turns into neutrality. That neutrality is powerful. It's not cold, it's centered. It doesn't say, I don't care. It says, I care more about myself now. And that is the moment you stop being an option and start being a mystery. He will feel the void. He will wonder what changed. He will sense the loss. And he will often come back, not because he was forced, but because he was pulled. This is why energy shifts are so powerful, because they're not about him, they're about you. They're about you detaching from the outcome, reclaiming your center, and letting the natural laws of attraction do their job. When you understand this, you stop chasing, because you realize that everything meant for you is drawn in by your peace, not by your pressure. This is the essence of Stoicism, not to become heartless, but to become heart-wise, to love without attachment, to care without losing yourself, and to detach not as revenge, but as resurrection. So the next time you're tempted to reach out, to explain, to fix, remember this: your energy is your currency. Spend it wisely, withdraw it when it's undervalued, and trust that your absence, if grounded in peace, will say more than your presence ever could. You don't need to chase what aligns with your soul. You only need to hold your energy with intention. Let the power of your shift create the space for them to return, and if they don't, it's because you've already shifted into something better. 2. Why over-attachment pushes them away. Let's get brutally honest. How often have you mistaken your anxiety for love? How many times have you told yourself, "I'm just being loyal," when really you were afraid of being abandoned? This is not about blaming yourself, but it is about waking up, because one of the most destructive patterns in modern dating is confusing attachment with affection. We think that the more we care, the more we should do. But here's the paradox: the more you overextend yourself in fear of losing someone, the more likely you are to actually lose them. That's the trap, and it's so common. You start with genuine affection, then you get caught in emotional dependency, and before you know it, your identity becomes fused with how they respond to you. Every text they send or don't send, every shift in their tone, every delay in response, starts to feel like a direct hit to your self-worth. You're constantly on edge, overanalyzing, trying to adjust your behavior to stay on their radar. This over-attachment creates emotional pressure, and whether they admit it or not, people can feel it. They feel that desperation in the air, even when you say nothing. And here's where it gets tricky. When someone feels emotionally crowded, they don't always tell you. They just start backing away, slowly, subtly. They get a little colder, they take longer to reply, they get busy. And you, instead of pulling back too, you double down. You send another text. You ask if something's wrong. You try to be more available, more flexible, more understanding. But this only accelerates the dynamic. Because the truth is, when your value starts to feel too accessible, people often stop valuing it. Not because you're not worthy, but because you've stopped protecting your energy. Over-attachment is like giving someone a backstage pass to your heart before they've even earned a ticket to the show. It floods the relationship before the other person has developed the emotional capacity to meet you halfway. And without knowing it, you start making them the source of your emotional stability. Your mood depends on them, your confidence depends on them, your peace depends on how they treat you. That is a dangerous position to put anyone in, not because they're evil, but because they're human. No one should have that much power over you. In Stoic relationships, the foundation isn't emotional dependency. It's mutual respect and emotional responsibility. You don't outsource your inner peace. You own it, you cultivate it, and when you do, the need to cling evaporates. But when you don't, the fear of loss becomes so overwhelming that you start micromanaging the relationship. You over-explain, over-apologize, over-give, and it backfires because nobody wants to feel like they're being chased by someone who doesn't trust their own worth. The irony is, the more you try to hold on, the more they feel the need to break free. Imagine holding sand in your hand. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. That's what over-attachment does. It creates tension where there should be ease. And yet we do it thinking we're fighting for love, but real love doesn't suffocate. It doesn't require constant proof or performance. It breathes. It allows space, and space is where attraction grows. Without space, there's no mystery. Without mystery, there's no pursuit. And without pursuit, there's no passion. So when you chase someone emotionally, when you need constant reassurance or try to control their behavior to feel secure, you actually rob them of the ability to come toward you freely. You deny them the opportunity to choose you, and being chosen freely is the only choice that matters. Stoicism teaches us to remain grounded in our own values, regardless of external outcomes. That means you don't let someone's inconsistency shake your sense of worth. You don't need to beg, convince, or negotiate your value. You simply show up with clarity and let your presence speak for itself. When you master this, you naturally stop over-attaching, not because you don't care, but because you care enough about yourself to remain centered. You start to see their behavior as information, not identity. If they pull away, you don't panic. You observe, you stay calm, you stay still. You understand that someone who truly values your presence won't need to be chased. They'll meet you where you are. They'll respect your space. And if they don't, it tells you something. It tells you they're not aligned with the level of emotional maturity you're operating from. And that's not rejection, it's redirection. The challenge is letting go of the belief that love must look like struggle, like proving, like constantly holding it together. That's not love. That's control. And it's exhausting. The moment you recognize this, you give yourself permission to stop chasing, to stop giving out passes to people who haven't earned access, to stop dimming your light to be palatable. And when you stop, that's when everything starts to change. Because your energy shifts, you become more peaceful, more attractive, more grounded, and people notice. Suddenly, you're not the one who's anxiously texting. You're the one who's calm, composed, and emotionally unavailable to chaos. That composure is magnetic. It radiates a sense of emotional safety, not just for you, but for the connection itself. And that's the paradox. When you stop over-attaching, you stop pushing people away, because now you're no longer clinging, you're standing. And when you stand, you invite others to step toward you instead of running from you. Emotional over-attachment isn't just unattractive, it's unsustainable. It burns both people out. It creates a pattern where one is always giving and the other is always pulling back. The only way to break that pattern is to disrupt your role in it, to recognize when your behavior is coming from fear instead of love, to call your energy back, not as punishment but as preservation, and to begin living, breathing, and loving from a place of fullness rather than lack. When you operate from stoicism, your sense of love becomes more refined. You realize that emotional chaos isn't romantic, it's unstable. That unpredictability doesn't build passion, it breaks trust. That someone making you anxious all the time isn't exciting, it's draining. And so you step back, not with drama, not with games, but with dignity. And in that space, you become magnetic again. Because now you're not asking, how can I make them stay? You're asking, do they deserve to? That's a power shift. That's a frequency change. And that's what turns the dynamic around, not because you forced it, but because you stopped distorting it with over-attachment. So take a breath. Let go of the need to control the outcome. Choose peace over panic. Choose space over suffocation. Choose value over validation. And watch how quickly the energy recalibrates, not just in your love life, but in your entire sense of self. If this resonates with you, if you've ever felt like you've lost yourself trying to keep someone else, now is the time to take your power back. And if you're watching this and feeling that internal shift already happening, then don't just keep it to yourself. Like this video and comment number 1 if this part hit home for you. Make sure you subscribe for more deep dives into Stoic relationships and emotional empowerment, because we're just getting started. 3. Detachment isn't giving up, it's getting clear. Most people misunderstand detachment. They think it's bitterness, shutting down, becoming cold or emotionally unavailable. They think detachment means giving up. But the truth is far more powerful. Detachment is not the absence of love. It is the presence of clarity. When you detach, you're not saying, "I don't care." You're saying, "I care about myself enough not to lose myself again." Detachment is the moment you stop negotiating your worth. It's the moment you stop trying to convince someone to see you, hear you, value you, not because they don't matter, but because you do. You've likely been conditioned to believe that fighting for love means holding on tightly, staying no matter what, proving your loyalty through sacrifice. But there's a very fine line between loyalty and self-abandonment. And if you've ever found yourself stuck in a dynamic where you're always explaining your feelings, always trying to make someone understand, always being the emotional glue holding it together, you already know that line gets blurred quickly. Real detachment doesn't come from resentment. It comes from wisdom. It comes from experiencing that pattern enough times to know that no amount of overgiving ever made someone stay who wasn't emotionally available. That no amount of effort can replace mutual desire. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both of you is to let go. Not to end the love, but to end the suffering. And that's what detachment really is. The decision to stop suffering, to stop being at the mercy of someone else's inconsistency, to stop explaining yourself in circles, to stop needing a response to feel okay. In Stoic relationships, detachment is emotional discipline. It's the moment you rise above the storm rather than drown in it. You don't lash out, you don't beg, you don't spiral, you observe, you breathe, you return to your center. Detachment is not passivity, it is not indifference. It is the conscious choice to remove your energy from what no longer serves your peace. And it is one of the most magnetic states of being you can ever step into. Why? Because when you are detached, you are no longer desperate. You're no longer trying to force a connection or overcompensate for emotional imbalance. You're just being. You become a woman who is rooted, composed, and at peace with herself. And that peace is deeply attractive. It doesn't scream. It doesn't chase. It doesn't manipulate. It simply exists. When a man senses that shift, that you're no longer energetically attached to him, something awakens. He begins to realize that your world does not revolve around him, that you are not anxiously waiting for his validation, that he can no longer control your emotional climate with his presence or absence. And that realization either inspires him to rise to meet you or quietly exit your life. Either way, detachment wins because it brings truth to the surface. And Stoicism teaches us that clarity, even when painful, is better than comfort built on illusion. So many women get stuck waiting for him to change, waiting for him to realize, waiting for the right time. But while you wait, your soul suffers. Your confidence erodes, your intuition dims. Detachment is the opposite of waiting. It is choosing yourself now rather than postponing your peace for a potential that may never manifest. It's saying, "I can love you and still leave the door open for something better." It's allowing the universe to rearrange your reality without micromanaging every outcome. And that requires immense trust. Trust in yourself, trust in life, trust in the process. Detachment is not easy because it demands that you walk away without closure, without apology, without the guarantee of a happy ending. But it gives you something greater. It gives you you. It restores your emotional equilibrium. It brings you back into alignment with your power. And from that place, you stop reacting and start responding. You no longer tolerate emotional crumbs. You no longer shrink to fit someone else's version of love. You no longer contort yourself for approval. Instead, you become the woman who sits in stillness while the world tries to figure her out. You become the one who is calm in the face of uncertainty. You become the one who knows that emotional chaos is not a love language. This shift is not loud, but it is life-altering. And it is in this stillness, in this composure, that you become unforgettable, because now you are no longer performing for love. You're no longer proving your worth through over-functioning. You're simply offering your presence, and whoever is meant for it will rise to meet it. Detachment means that your energy becomes sacred, that not everyone gets access, that your time, your body, your emotional investment are no longer given recklessly. You stop saying yes out of fear. You stop holding space for people who cannot hold space for you. You stop over-explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. And in this space, you begin to see clearly who truly values you, not through their words, but through their consistency. Because detachment sharpens your perception, it cuts through fantasy, it reveals patterns, and it invites alignment. You begin to attract not from need, but from wholeness. Not from lack, but from inner abundance. And ironically, this is when love becomes possible again. Because now, you're no longer seeking completion in someone else. You're already whole. You're not looking to be saved, you're choosing to be met. And that is the deepest form of self-respect. In Stoicism, we learn that emotional mastery isn't about suppressing feelings. It's about not allowing them to dictate our actions. Detachment is the embodiment of this principle. You can still love, you can still feel, but you no longer collapse into those feelings. You carry them with grace, with strength, with discernment. You stop chasing closure and start creating peace. You stop seeking permission to heal and begin healing anyway. And in this process, you no longer lose yourself in someone else's potential. You stay grounded in the reality of who they are, how they show up, and what they can truly offer. Detachment gives you the eyes to see clearly. And when you see clearly, you choose wisely. You no longer confuse attraction with alignment, chemistry with compatibility, passion with partnership. You start asking deeper questions. Does this connection bring me peace? Do I feel safe, seen, supported? Am I expanding or shrinking in this relationship? These are the questions detachment makes possible, because now you're not reacting out of fear, you're observing with calm awareness. And from this place, you make decisions not from desperation, but from wisdom. That wisdom becomes your anchor. That clarity becomes your compass, and that is what allows you to stop losing yourself in others. You begin to trust that what's meant for you won't require you to beg, break, or betray yourself. You begin to understand that love that costs you your peace is too expensive. You begin to embody the truth that the right person doesn't just love you. They respect your boundaries, match your effort, and protect your energy. And until someone shows up in that way, your detachment is your protection. It shields your heart from emotional chaos. It filters out those who are not ready for your depth, and it preserves your sacred energy for what truly aligns. This is not a phase, it is a lifestyle, a stoic lifestyle, a declaration that your peace is non-negotiable, that your heart is precious, that your time is valuable. And once you understand this, you never go back. You never again pour into someone who leaves you empty. You never again stay where you are tolerated instead of celebrated. You never again choose potential over reality. Instead, you choose yourself, fully, unapologetically, repeatedly. That is not giving up. That is getting clear. And that clarity will transform not just your relationships, but your entire life. 4. How detachment triggers their curiosity. There's a strange but powerful shift that happens when you emotionally let go. Something invisible yet magnetic begins to unfold, and you'll see it most clearly in their sudden curiosity. It almost feels unfair, right? You've been loyal, consistent, emotionally available, and during that time, they didn't seem to value it the way you hoped. But the moment you pull your energy back, the moment you detach, not as a tactic, but from real emotional clarity, everything changes. They start to wonder about you. They start to feel your absence more than they ever felt your presence. That's not a game. That's energetic truth. Detachment creates space, and in that space, questions start to form. Curiosity is born from silence, from the unknown, from contrast. When you were always there, when you were predictable in your affection, when your energy was always moving toward them, you became part of the background, familiar, comfortable, expected. But when that stream of attention suddenly stops, they're forced to face a new reality. The version of you that was always available is no longer accessible. And that absence is a disruption to the dynamic they had grown accustomed to. Humans are creatures of habit. We crave what we're used to, even if we take it for granted. And when what we're used to suddenly vanishes, we start looking for it, even if we didn't appreciate it before, especially then. So when you detach and you no longer feed the connection with emotional attention, your presence becomes scarce, and scarcity breeds value. Think about it. If someone always replies immediately, you don't think about it. But if one day they don't, your mind starts to ask questions. Are they okay? Are they mad? Are they seeing someone else? The mind hates open loops. And detachment is one giant open loop. It's a question with no answer. It's a shift without explanation. And that drives curiosity. They might scroll through your social media. They might reread your last messages. They might even test the waters with a casual text. But it's not just about the action. It's about the internal shift that prompted it. The absence of your energy forces them to pay attention, not just to you, but to their own feelings. This is when memory starts to play tricks. When nostalgia kicks in, they remember your voice, your laugh, the way you supported them when no one else did. They recall your softness, your presence, your glow. And it hits differently now, because it's no longer guaranteed. Detachment removes certainty, and uncertainty is what creates intrigue. This is the psychological pull that makes detachment so powerful, not because you're manipulating, but because you're no longer interrupting. The natural law of cause and effect. You've taken your hands off the steering wheel, you've stopped forcing, and now the emotional vacuum you've created is doing the work for you. But this only works when your detachment is genuine. If you're pretending to pull back but secretly still obsessed, that energy leaks through. People feel it. Real detachment is not absence with bitterness, it's absence with peace. It's you showing up differently in your own life, posting less about your sadness and more about your growth, not reacting to their baiting messages, not playing the same emotional game. This new version of you, calm, composed, focused on your life, becomes a mystery. They no longer know how to reach you, how to read you, how to predict you. And unpredictability is intoxicating. When you were predictable, they felt safe in your certainty. Now that you're detached, they're confronted with their own uncertainty, and that uncertainty makes them start looking for clues. Curiosity leads to pursuit, because now they want to understand the shift. They want to solve the puzzle. They want to know if you've moved on, if you're seeing someone else, if you're simply done. And every unanswered question fuels their emotional engagement. This is why Stoic relationships work, because you're not operating from emotional chaos, you're operating from calm presence. Your stillness becomes the force that moves others, not through words but through energetic contrast. When someone is used to emotional fireworks and you give them silence, it unsettles them, not in a cruel way, but in a clarifying one. It forces them to realize what they had, to recognize what they miss, to reevaluate how they treated you. And not everyone will rise to the occasion. Some will disappear altogether, and that's a good thing, because the ones who disappear were never really curious about you. They were just comfortable with what you gave. The ones who do come back with a different energy, because now you're not chasing, you're not convincing, you're not feeding the fantasy. You've grounded yourself in reality, and from that grounded place, your presence becomes a reward, not an expectation. The person who once saw you as a convenience now sees you as a prize, but only if your detachment is real. That's the key, because when you detach authentically, you don't just step back from them, you step forward into yourself. And that shift is what transforms everything. They feel it before they understand it. That's how energy works. You can say nothing and still communicate everything. You can be absent and still be felt. And when your absence is filled with purpose, it creates a magnetic pull. It says, I'm not here to prove my worth, I am the worth. And that energy cannot be faked. You don't need to post a thirst trap. You don't need to make anyone jealous. You just need to reclaim your attention, your presence, your emotional availability. That quiet detachment is the spark that lights the fire of their curiosity. And once that fire is lit, they will often circle back, not because you ask them to, but because they have to. It's the mind's natural response to emotional interruption. It seeks resolution. And the mystery of your detachment becomes the unresolved thread they now want to follow. But here's the beauty. When they do come back, you're no longer the same. You've evolved, you're grounded. You've seen what happens when you stop chasing and start choosing. And that gives you a new power, not the power to control them, but the power to choose whether you even want them back. Because sometimes detachment reveals not only who comes back, but who should stay gone. This is the quiet clarity that Stoicism offers. It teaches you to stand still in the storm, to allow space for truth to rise, to stop interrupting the consequences of other people's behavior. You no longer reward inconsistency with attention. You no longer confuse absence with punishment. You understand that your energy is your most valuable currency. And if someone's not investing in you, you don't invest in them. That's not being cold. That's being clear. And clarity is the most attractive quality you can embody. It says, I know what I offer. I don't chase because I don't need to. That statement, made silently through your actions, is what triggers their deepest curiosity, because now they see you differently, not as someone begging for love, but as someone who is love and is no longer offering it to just anyone. You are the mystery they didn't expect, the one who disappeared without warning, the one who glowed up instead of broke down, the one who stopped texting and started thriving. And that version of you lives rent-free in their mind, not because you played games, but because you stopped playing yourself. That is the power of detachment. It doesn't just create space for others to reflect, it creates space for you to evolve. And in that evolution, you find your real magnetism. It was never in what you gave, it was in who you became when you stopped giving it away to the wrong people. So if this part of the video spoke to you, if you've felt the shift, if you've seen their curiosity rise the moment you detached, then go ahead, like this video, comment number 1 below, and make sure you subscribe so you never miss another truth bomb about stoic relationships and emotional mastery. Your glow up isn't coming, it's already happening. 5. What to do during the detachment phase. The moment you decide to detach isn't the end, it's the beginning. It's the moment you stop pouring energy into someone else and start reinvesting it into yourself. And while detachment is a powerful shift in energy, what truly determines whether it transforms your life or just becomes another emotional phase is what you do in the space that follows. This phase, the in-between, the quiet, the stillness, is sacred. It is here that you begin to rewire your inner world, not through force, but through intention. And this is where most people either elevate or relapse, because the temptation is strong, The mind wants answers, the heart wants resolution, the ego wants to know if they've noticed your absence, and if you don't anchor yourself in purpose. That void can pull you right back into old patterns. But the Stoic path, the one rooted in peace, teaches you to sit in that silence without reaching for chaos. It teaches you that uncertainty isn't your enemy, it's your teacher. So what do you do during the detachment phase? First, you stop checking. Stop stalking their social media. Stop replaying old messages. Stop dissecting every last conversation for clues. All of that keeps your energy tied to them, even if you're not physically speaking. Detachment is not just absence of action, it's redirection of attention. Your attention is powerful, and in this phase, it must return home. You must begin to pour it back into yourself, not with the motive of making them miss you, but with the commitment to making you whole. That means cleaning up your inner world. That means tending to the parts of you that felt unworthy when they pulled away. That means confronting the stories you told yourself that said, "If I had just been more..." No, that narrative dies here. You were never too much. You were never not enough. You were simply giving too much to someone who wasn't ready to receive it. And in this space, your healing begins. You create a routine that holds you, not one based on numbing or avoidance, but one built on nourishment. You wake up and move your body, not to change how you look for someone else, but to remember how strong you really are. You sit in stillness, not to escape your thoughts, but to finally hear yourself again. You start writing, not to vent, but to reconnect with your truth. You ask yourself better questions, not what is he thinking, but what am I believing about myself right now that needs to be re-examined. This is emotional maturity. This is how Stoicism becomes more than a concept. It becomes a lifestyle, because Stoicism isn't about suppressing your feelings during detachment. It's about not letting those feelings run your life. It's about observing your pain, not becoming it. And in this phase, you will feel pain. Let that be okay. Let yourself grieve, not just the person, but the illusion you held onto. The fantasy that your love alone could fix it. The false hope that if you just stayed a little longer, tried a little harder, loved a little louder, it would be enough. Honor that grief. Let it teach you. But don't let it define you, because while one part of you is breaking, another part is being born. And if you stay present, if you resist the urge to chase the past, you'll meet her. The woman you're becoming. She doesn't beg. She doesn't bargain. She doesn't wait for permission to rise. She knows her peace is more valuable than a returned text. She knows her presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. And during this detachment phase, everything you do is about becoming her. So you glow up, but from the inside. You declutter your space. You drink more water. You laugh without guilt. You take photos not to post them, but to capture your joy. You surround yourself with people who don't drain you. You listen to music that lifts you. You create not for validation, but because it's part of your essence. And slowly, something shifts. Your mood stabilizes, your focus sharpens, your intuition grows louder, and in that space, something magical happens. You stop wondering about them. You start wondering about you, about your goals, your dreams, your future. You begin to see that detachment didn't create emptiness. It created opportunity, the opportunity to come home to yourself, to recalibrate your standards, to remember who you were before the heartbreak, and better yet, to evolve beyond her. Because now you know what you will no longer tolerate. You know what patterns no longer belong in your life. You know that silence isn't loneliness, it's recalibration. That waiting isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That not everyone deserves a second chance just because they circle back. This is what you cultivate in the detachment phase. Discernment. You begin to see people clearly because your emotions are no longer clouding your judgment. You begin to feel your power return, not because someone validated you, but because you finally stopped abandoning yourself. And the more you ground into this version of you, the less reactive you become. The texts don't shake you. The silence doesn't scare you. The memories don't haunt you. Why? Because you're rooted, because you've been spending every day in devotion to your growth, because you've been becoming the woman who no longer needs external reassurance to feel whole, and that wholeness is what makes you untouchable. This is the phase where your future self is forged, not in grand declarations, but in small daily choices. Every time you choose to sit with the discomfort instead of numbing it, every time you choose to redirect your focus instead of spiraling, every time you choose peace over panic. These are the bricks. This is the foundation. This is how you build an unshakable self. Stoic relationships are built on this version of you, the one who no longer needs to be chosen to feel valuable, who no longer attaches her worth to someone else's capacity to love her, who no longer asks for crumbs when she is the whole damn meal. And when this version of you emerges, you don't have to chase anyone. You don't have to prove anything. Because your energy speaks louder than your words. It says, I've done the work. I'm no longer emotionally available to games, confusion, or half-love. And that frequency attracts differently. It doesn't pull in more chaos. It repels it. It filters. It protects. It aligns. So during this detachment phase, know that every moment you spend alone is not empty. It's sacred. Every tear you cry is not weakness. It's wisdom being released. Every time you resist the urge to go back to what broke you, you're breaking a cycle. And cycles break when women rise, when they get still, when they get serious about themselves, when they stop looking for love to save them and start becoming the love they were looking for. That's what this phase is about. It's not punishment, it's preparation. And when you treat it as such, you don't just recover from heartbreak, you alchemize it. You turn pain into power, loss into leadership, silence into sovereignty. And from that place, you don't hope they come back. You decide if you'll let them. That is the difference. That is what Stoicism gifts you. Not a heartless exterior, but an emotionally sovereign core. You still feel, you still care, you still love. But you do it all from a place of strength, not scarcity. From fullness, not fear. And in that fullness, your entire life begins to shift. You attract opportunities. You magnetize connections. You radiate confidence. Not because you're pretending to be fine, but because you are. Not perfect, not healed in some Instagrammable way, but whole in your truth, solid in your presence, unshakable in your peace. And when you live from that place, you don't need to chase love. It finds you. 6. When and why they often come back. There's a certain moment after you detach when the silence gets loud, not for you, but for them. It's not immediate. It doesn't happen the day after you stop calling, texting, or showing up. At first, they might feel relieved, even justified, as if they've regained control of the emotional dynamic. But then something shifts, slowly at first, then all at once. The rhythm changes. The absence begins to echo. They start to notice the stillness, not because you told them you were gone, but because the pull they used to feel from you no longer exists. And that's when the return often begins. But make no mistake, it's not your silence alone that brings them back. It's what the silence represents. When someone who used to revolve around you suddenly stops, it causes a rupture in their reality. They used to know exactly how to trigger a reaction, how to test the waters, how to keep you emotionally available. They depended on your attachment. Maybe they didn't do it consciously, but they relied on the security of your presence. And when that presence disappears, not with drama, but with grace, it confronts them with something they were never prepared for. Life without you. And not just your body, but your energy, your spirit, your attention, your softness, your encouragement, your emotional availability, because whether they knew it or not, you were holding up part of their emotional structure. You were the safe space, the anchor, the mirror. And now that you're gone, they're left to face their own reflection. And sometimes that's unbearable. That's why so many people come back. Not because they've suddenly evolved, but because they finally feel the absence. It's in the late night scrolling through your photos. It's in the way their favorite song reminds them of you. It's in the silence that follows a joke they wish they could share. Detachment creates contrast, and contrast reveals impact. They didn't feel your light when it was shining on them every day, but now that it's gone, they realize how warm it was. And that's the paradox of human nature. We often don't value what we have until it's no longer ours. But your return doesn't guarantee reconciliation, and that's where your power lies. Because when they do come back, they come back to a different version of you. You're no longer waiting. You're no longer reaching. You're no longer performing for love. You're grounded, centered, calm. And that calm unnerves them. Because it says, I don't need you. I needed clarity. And I found it in your absence. Stoic relationships are built on that clarity. When someone returns, it's not about the grand apology or the dramatic gesture. It's about alignment. It's about their willingness to meet you at your new frequency. And many won't. They'll try to re-enter with old patterns. They'll test the waters with breadcrumb messages. Hey, just thinking about you. Miss your face. Remember that time we... And they'll expect you to pick up where things left off, but you won't. Because during your detachment phase, you evolved. You became emotionally fluent. You started recognizing patterns. You learned that presence is a privilege and not everyone deserves yours. And now, their return isn't exciting, it's information. You don't feel butterflies, you feel discernment. You observe their consistency, their tone, their intentions, and you no longer give them the benefit of the doubt. You give them the opportunity to show up right. If they do, then maybe, just maybe, there's space for something new. But if they don't, you don't collapse, you don't chase, you don't hope, because your peace is no longer negotiable. This is where your power solidifies, not in whether they come back, but in how you respond when they do. Detachment gives you options. It frees you from emotional dependency. It restores your right to choose. And that is where true confidence is born, not in being chosen, but in knowing you don't need to be. Some of them come back because they're genuinely sorry. Some come back because they miss the emotional safety you provided. Some come back because your glow-up intimidates them. And some come back just to see if they still can. Your job is not to guess which one it is. Your job is to stay rooted in what you now know. That your energy is sacred, that your standards are real, that your value is not up for debate. This is stoicism in action. You don't allow emotions to dictate decisions. You observe, you measure, you decide. You move from strength, not scarcity. And when you operate like this, you become the most powerful woman in the room. Not because you control others, but because you've mastered yourself. When they come back, they will notice the difference. Your tone is different. Your responses are slower. Your eyes don't light up the way they used to, not out of spite, but out of sovereignty. You are no longer looking for closure because you gave that to yourself. You are no longer needing answers because you've accepted what is. And that calm acceptance, that stillness in your soul, that's what shakes them. That's what makes them question how they ever let you go. But now it's no longer about them choosing you. It's about whether you choose to open the door. And many times you won't, because what you've built in their absence is too sacred to risk for anything less than certainty. You've built emotional resilience. You've built clarity. You've built peace. And peace is expensive. Peace is not traded for a weak apology or a vague promise. Peace is protected, and you are the guardian of it. So when they come back, as they often do, remember this: you are not the same woman who once begged for consistency. You are the woman who learned to become her own sanctuary. You are the woman who no longer begs for answers because you trust your intuition. You are the woman who no longer attaches to potential because you choose reality. And in that grounded, centered state, you evaluate, not from loneliness, but from alignment. If they match your energy, your depth, your intentions, then perhaps something new can unfold. But if not, you bless and release, not from anger, but from grace. Because you don't cling to what isn't yours. You don't hold space for what doesn't feed your soul. You walk away, not to punish, but to preserve. This is the final evolution of detachment. It is not the absence of love, it is the elevation of it. And it is here, in this state of unshakable clarity, that the right connections begin to find you. Because now, you're no longer chasing love. You're living in alignment with it. And love that aligns doesn't confuse you. It doesn't delay. It doesn't disrupt your peace. It matches your effort. It honors your depth. It adds to your life, not drains it. This is what detachment reveals. This is what Stoicism prepares you for. The return is not the goal. The realization is. The realization that the person you became in the silence is far more powerful than the person who once begged to be heard. And when you stand in that power, you stop asking, will they come back? And you start asking, do I even want them to? That shift is everything. That shift is freedom. That shift is your highest self rising. So if this truth resonated with you, if you felt that power returning to you, then let the world know. Like this video, comment #1 below and subscribe so you never miss a moment of growth, wisdom, or clarity on your journey through Stoic relationships and emotional mastery. You've done the work. Now let it speak for itself. So here you are, at the end of the detachment and at the beginning of everything else. The version of you that started this journey is not the version who stands here now. She was searching, reaching, maybe hurting, maybe hoping. She was trying to hold something together that was never meant to be carried alone. But through the silence, the stillness, the surrender, she remembered something deeper than desire. She remembered her worth. Detachment wasn't the loss, it was the lesson. It taught you how to stop handing over your peace in exchange for temporary comfort. It taught you how to sit with the ache without running from it. It taught you how to reclaim your power, not by being louder, but by becoming still. It wasn't a withdrawal from love, it was a return to it, to the kind of love that begins with you. And now you see with new eyes. You understand that what leaves your life when you stop chasing was never stable to begin with, that what crumbles under the weight of your silence was built on fragile ground, that who circles back is not always a sign to restart, but often a mirror to how far you've come, because the real success of detachment isn't whether they come back, it's whether you do. Back to your strength, back to your boundaries, back to your balance. Stoicism doesn't promise that the world will be fair. It promises that you will be steady. It doesn't require that you stop feeling. It invites you to stop being owned by those feelings. And now you know, you've seen how energy speaks louder than effort, how absence can hold more weight than presence, how silence can lead to the loudest breakthroughs. You didn't need to prove anything. You didn't need to chase, to fix, to force. You simply needed to return to yourself, and in doing so, you became the answer, the attraction, the clarity, the closure. Not because someone gave it to you, but because you chose to give it to yourself. And in that choice, everything changed.